In the end of the 17th paragraph, in the 13th halacha, the Rambam is describing how a person can donate loaves of wine or oil to the temple for the sake of sacrifice. So a log of wine is kind of useless. Why? Because wine is brought in certain ratios depending on what kind of animal is brought with it. So wine is supposed to be a libation. That means a nesach, a liquid offering to accompany the meat offering. The meat is from the animal, right? So it says if you bring a lamb, so you're supposed to bring 3 loaves. That's what's called a revi'i tahim. A quarter of a hin is 3 loaves because there's 12 loaves to a hin. Right. Next, if you have a ram as the sacrifice, so you're supposed to bring 4 log, which is flishi tahim, a third of a hin. Mentioned many times in Parshas Pinchas, for example. Oh, are we disconnected? No, okay, we're still here. Next, then if you bring a bull, you're supposed to bring chatzi hahim, which is 6 log. That's what you're supposed to do. So it doesn't really fit to bring 1 log or 2 log because there's no animal that to which can be accompanied by such an amount of wine.
They just like storing
No, no, it has to be in groups. You can't just combine it. You're not supposed to be mixing, by the way, these things. There are rules about mixing wine, certain libations, but those are once they're all complete libations. We're going to get to those. That's the end of Tmida Musaf. What?
in one jug.
Yeah, it's supposed to be in one bottle, basically in bottles that match this, or multiple bottles. So the point is,
from the place where they squeeze the wine from the barrel, you have to pour it into a 6 log jug and then bring it to the
or 6 1 log jugs, 6 jugs.
So you bring a 1 log jug.
They have nothing to do with it. It has to be a complete korban. It's incomplete. It's like bringing a leg of an animal.
Just like bring it to the temple whenever they need it.
So read what the halach says.
Bottles.
Here's what it says: Mitnadev adam o noder yain b'fnei atzmo. The 12th halach, he said. This is where we left off last week. Ve'en mitnavim log yain o shnei login. She'ein banasachim lo log v'lo shnayim. It's not a korban. There's no thing as a korban of just 1 log or 2 log. Lugin, sorry. The plural, because log, the shorish of log, by the way, is lamed gimel gimel. The plural loses the cholam and it gets a kubutz instead, and a dagation the gimel. You see that? Lugin, like chulin. The shorish of chulin is chet lamed lamed, whole. So when you have a pluralization, there's a dot in the lamed to make up for the missing lamed, and you have a shuruk, kubutz. Okay, not a shuruk, not a chulam. You have a smaller vowel, either a kamatz katan or a kubutz. So there's no such thing as a korban of 1 log or 2 log. Then the Rambam said also, by the way, and there's no such thing as a 5 log either. Why? Because you're going to give 3 log for the ram, but we're going to do the other 2 logs, or give 4 log. 3 log for the lamb. Yeah, we're going to do the other 2 log, or you're going to give 4 log for the ram. We're going to do with that other log. That's what we saw. Make sense?
You have to bring the wine specifically for specific korban,
or it has to match for korban. There has to be an amount that the Torah declares.
Just like bring a bottle of wine to temple and just put it in the pantry.
No, you can't. So you could, I guess, give it to hektish, but then they won't make it a korban, and then it becomes temple property, and they have to sell it. But if you want to make something a korban specifically, it has to be something that's fit as a korban. You understand?
So specifically talking about bringing wine for the purpose of a korban.
Yes, purpose of a korban to pour on the altar as a libation. Okay. So the Rambam says 5 isn't good enough. That's where we left off, and then we said in Yud Gimel. So, but once you get above 5, 6, you could divide up 3 and 3. That's enough. That's enough libations for two lambs.
Or you just give it to the cow.
Well, give it to the cow. The bull is 6. But hold on, or if you give it for a bull. But 7, it works also. So the Rambam says here, Elam misdavdim shlosha arba v'shisha, but not 1, 2, or 5. Okay, and from 6 and above, there's always a way to divide it among the amounts that are already prescribed for individual animals. Okay.
So what happens if I bring a korban, like a ram?
It
needs 4, right?
It needs 4 log, yeah.
Okay, and then I bring 7 log.
So you have
I don't
extra.
have any other korban.
Okay.
Just extra wine.
Just extra wine. So they'll say like, okay, so the 4 log are for your ram, and the other 3 log we'll just give it, yeah. And then they'll put on a korban. Like I said, it'll just be a wine offering unto itself. Okay.
For what?
For stam. That's what Rambam saying here. The introduction was there's a way to just give a korban of wine. Normally, you bring an animal, so you have to bring an attendant amount of wine and flour and oil. There has to be an accompanying mincha, and the mincha is made of wine, flour, and oil.
Okay.
And there's a nesech, so it accompanies, that's the wine. But minastam, you could also just bring a mincha on its own, or wine on its own. And we're about to see even just oil. You want to just donate oil to the temple for the mizbeach, so you could bring oil. And it wouldn't be poured, by the way, like wine. It's not poured like a libation. Okay.
The oil mixed with the flour.
Normally, that's for a normal meal offering. But
What
if
do
you
do
just,
with oil if you just
so we're
bring
going to
oil?
read this. Yeah. That's where we have to see the halacha. You're getting ahead of this. So Yud Dalet says, Nadar chameshes lugin omrim lo hashlim shisha. If he does bring 5 log, what do they tell him to do? Could you bring another bottle so you can bring it up to 6? Sharei kiva an korban. He did make them into a korban. They're dedicated, but he can't bring it. So what should he do? Fix it. Aval im nadar logo shnayim. Let's say he said he took this. He doesn't know the halach as well. He says this log. This is about a log of wine for the altar. 2 logs of wine for the altar. What's going to happen? Patur sharei and unruin klal lo hein velo miksatan.
Why didn't it become hektish?
Well,
Why didn't it just become hektish?
because there's hektish is something else entirely. It's not korban necessarily. It becomes temple property. It's like temple treasury property,
Okay.
and it's meant to be sold at a certain price so that the temple has money for what it needs, the general temple fund.
Okay.
So miksat of 5 can be an offering. Okay, so when a person donates 5, there's a miksat can be used, but over here, at least some of it that is. But if he just says this 1 wine bottle, this 2 wine bottle, it's going to be, for the base for the mizbeach, so that's not fit to be a korban, so it doesn't have hektish to it. He's putter, right?
Okay. So if he brings 6 with the lamb, then the other 3 that he's not using with this korban, won't he just wait for another lamb to come along and use it?
No, they make it a korban on its own.
Oh yeah. We said this.
Yeah. Ve'ein mitnadvim v'lo nodrin pachot milov shamen. There's no such thing as voluntarily bring as a korban and say, what's it in nadava and neder or nadava? Neder means we look at the gavra, and the nadava we look at the hefza. Achrayos or no achrayos, we've explained this difference before. So there's no such thing as less than a log of oil. She'ein l'cha mincha pchuta misaron v'yitzricha log echad shemen. The minimum oil is actually less than the minimum wine. Wine, there's no such thing as less than 3 log of wine. 3, it's either 3, but not 2 or 1. But there is an idea of bringing 1 log of shemen. Why? A standard mincha, the minimum size is an isaron of flour and a log of shemen to go along with it. So that works. So you can bring a log of shemen. That means a log of oil. It's basically a bottle of oil, like almost our standard size of olive oil bottles. So yeah, very interesting. And by the way, we wrote this at the end of the halacha. V'hitzricha log echad. I say shaman, right? What do you have written in your book? Also, it should be shemen, right?
Yeah.
So, what's the problem with the nikud there? I wrote myself a note. It should be shaman. The gamba makbili no lo nukad kadin. Even the makbili, they did it wrong. How do I know that the word should be shaman? Because it's the end of a halacha. It's the end of a paragraph. Every time in the Torah, it's like that. It's also shaman, not shemen. It's shaman at the end of a sentence. So why do they not agree with this? I heard someone say a blessing. They recited the Kiddush on Friday night. They said, Bori Prihak Geffen. So, okay, I know even Rabbi Mazuz says, yeah, Spartam do that, but it's still wrong. It should be Geffen, like in the Bible. And then they said, Mekadesh HaShabbat. I said, Mekadesh HaShabeth. It should be Shabbat. Why? If you turn the kamatz in the word Geffen, in the accented syllable, to Geffen, so Shabbat, which has a kamatz there also in the accented syllable, should also be a segol when you say it, because that's what you're doing apparently. You're turning kamatzes into segols. Mikadesh HaShabbat. Now that's not such a good taina. Why? Because really, minastam, it's geffen. It's with the segol. It only became a kamatz at the end of a sentence. But Shabbat is always with a kamatz. Even middle of sentence, end of a sentence, it's always like that. Although sometimes it's the patach when it's in the smichut. The Shabbat of something is Shabbat with a patach. And if you say it's his Shabbat, suddenly the tough actually gets a dot. So his Shabbos is Shabbato, right? Which is kind of weird if you grew up in Ashkenazic lands. So you know this is one of the things. It's not Shabbat the way people are saying it. Every time you read the Torah, it's Shabbos, right? Shabbos with a kametz and a saf. But then suddenly you get to the word, it's possessive, Shabbat b'Shabbato and Shabbatechem. When it's possessive, there's actually a patach there, and there's a dagesh in the tough, just like pronounced in modern Hebrew. So it's interesting that they're actually placed in the Torah that even according to Ashkenazim, it's pronounced fully like Shabbat. Okay, so it wasn't such a good taina, but it's a little bit of a cute taina. That
Is it?
if what?
I have a question about this.
Yeah, please.
Is it Morid Hageshem or Morid Hagashim?
Morida Geshem.
That's what I thought.
But if you stop there, it becomes Gashem.
In some places it's written Morid Hagashim. I always felt there wasn't a strong enough seek.
Okay, so years ago, maybe I have a recording about this one. Years ago, I had proposed when I was in senior high school. I remember at the Simchas Beis Shueva. I said that there's a haftarah that they read on Shavuos on Sukkos. V'lo alehem yihyeh hagashem. Okay, the Navi talks about in the future. The rain shall not be upon them. It says Gashem. So what is it referring to? If you say God's just going to deprive them of rain, the rain shall not go down upon them. They will not be upon them. So, yeah, it means that depriving them of rain. And the Chazal said, no, it's the special rain that's going to cause Tchias HaMesim. It's going to resurrect the dead. That's the rain. That means those people will not merit to be involved in the resurrection. Okay? They have karis, basically. So when you say the blessing in every day in your Shemona Esrei, when you look at that Mashiv Ruach Amrita Geshem, are you talking about physical rain, or are you talking about the rain that's going to cause the resurrection of the dead? I mean, if you're actually looking in context, at least according to Nusach Bavel, give me a sitter over here. Is that a sitter? The bottom one? Come on. Yeah, it's Edom Mizrach, but it's fine. It's still kosher. Okay. Look at this. What are we talking about in context? Very good question. It says here. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. Here it says, "Atagibor l'olam Hashem mechayim yitimata rav l'oshia." He's talking about Roshia's redemption, and there's Tchias HaMesim. And after that, we talk about mechalkel hayim behesed, sustains life. So if you say this line, Mashiva Ruach Amrita Gashem, is connected to that which is before it, Tchias HaMesim, it's the rain that's going to resurrect the dead. So it's a Reisha Kai, it's connected to that which is before it, and it ends over here. So then it should be Gashem. You're ending the sentence over there. Mechayim Yisimat Rav Lushia, Mashiva Ruach Amrita Gashem. You give them the rain that's going to bring them back to life. So if you're saying that this is the rain of resurrection, and you're stopping there, so it should be a kamatz. But if you say the stop was Rav Lushia, end sentence, Mashiva Ruach Amrita Geshem Mechalkel Hayim Behesed, he causes the wind to blow and bring down the rain, and he sustains all life. So he's talking about physical rain here, in which case it should be a segol. Okay? So this idea, are you stopping there or not, basically is depends on how you read this sentence in context. This fragment in context. Is it the end of the previous, or is it the beginning of the next?
Beginning of the next.
So I read it as beginning of the next, because how do I know it's not talking about the reign of resurrection? Because Chazal told us to say this only at the times when we need to praise God for giving us rain, and you're not supposed to say it during the summer months, as they say. So it's connected to the season.
Well, also,
yeah.
Let's say another sort of is
that
if you forget to say it, just add it in somewhere in the list.
Yeah,
it makes it feel like it's just part of the list of things that makes God great.
Yeah.
Previous sentence. You don't repeat the whole first part.
Yeah. So that's what we hold this way. So I say Geshem all the time. I never say Gashem. Even if the sitter in front of me says Gashem, I don't. Just like if the sitter in front of me would say Bori Pri Hagafen, I would still say Hagafen. Okay, that's your way you're supposed to do it. So okay, they got it there. And by the way, this is the same thing which they have in their text about. This is another thing that we had to do in Haggadah Pesach. There's a blessing to be said upon eating the Chagiga, if there is Chagiga, and there's a blessing to be said upon eating the Korban Pesach, which is what? Please don't do that. Okay, al achilath hazevach. That's the way they have it in the Makbili in the Koran, if I'm not mistaken. And it should be al achilath hazavach. Okay, and same thing with Pesach. Many times Pesach is Pasach. when it's at a major stop. So that's how the bracha should be. Even though there was a rabbi around here who told me, no, you have to change it. It should be Pesach. I said, no, it's Pasach because of TikTok and all that. Okay, so what am I supposed to do? So here's a limit klus on them for saying Pasach. They're not wanting to say Pasach. You know why? Why would they shy away from saying Pasach? Because you and I say it Mil'el. Once it's Pasach, Kamatz Patach, and it's said Milra, and they accent the wrong syllable, like all the Frenchies, they're going to say Ala Chilata Pasach. So they're turning it into a verb. If you take that word Pasach and say it Milra, you've turned it into a verb.
Okay.
From the word Lifsoach. So better if you leave it with the Segol, it's even if they say it Pesach, they're not going to confuse it with the verb. They know that it's referring to the noun, the Korban Pesach.
They're just choosing how you want to be wrong.
Yeah, they're just choosing how to be wrong. And also, yeah, so you shouldn't learn about anything about Hebrew pronunciation from people who are not like me. Basically, like Frenchies, like that. Just kidding. Yeah.
I think they should start by adding the dagesh chazak, the chadri, kala.
Okay, likarat. I know you told the kids that if you add shvanaz all over the place, it makes it sound more oriental. Yeah, okay. Let's see the next halacha. The last halacha here. So it says, Homer harei ala yayin. So a person has taken upon himself to bring a korban of wine to the temple. Lo yivchot mishloshet lugim. We already heard this before, right? No less than 3 lug. Wait, what? Just read the last halacha. Harei ala shemen lo yivchot milog. This seems a little bit redundant. We knew these laws already. I made a note to myself. Why did the Rambam repeat this? And if he's giving oil, no less than 1 log. Why is the difference between wine? Wine 3 log, because that's the minimum that the Torah asks for wine in any one place. And the minimum the Torah says for oil is a log. By the way, log is still the biblical word for that, right? What does it say? The log echad shaman. 1 log. That's an ancient biblical measure. There are certain things that the word changes, for example. Sometimes shekel, zuz is not in the Torah, right? So there's beka and shekel. And then in Chazal's times, the shekel was already called what? Selah. Okay. Selah is a Hebrew word also, but why do they call it a selah? So that's a good question. So Pirash nidro v'shachach kama log nadar min hayano min hashemin. He knows that he had taken upon himself to bring this korban, but he forgot the amount he had enunciated. Was it 3 log of oil, 1 log of shemen, or 250 billion? Somewhere in between, right? So he doesn't know what he said. He knows it's an amount. Yavi meya v'arba'im log. So he should bring 140 log of either wine or oil, whichever one he said he would bring. Why? Because meya v'arba'im is the maximum that could be brought on any one day in the temple of the animal sacrifices prescribed by that day. How? She'en lecha yom shemakrivim bo hatzibur korbanot merubot yoter miyom tov rishon shel chag shechal yoth b'shabbat. The most busy possible day. What?
What
What do I have here? That's Berkodath Yather. Okay, I have Yather also in my Korain, but I read this from Machon Mamri, and they have Yother with the Cholam. What's the between Yather and Yother? Nothing. Okay. However, what is the let's deconstruct. Let's analyze the difference. You have a lot of let's say this is it's sort of like a verb, right? It's once again it's masculine, singular, present tense from the shoresh yod taf resh, right? So it should be yoter, right? And past tense would be yothar, and the future would be what? Yither. Okay, so that's what it looks like. That's how it's brought about. So why would you have it with the kamatz? Because there's certain verbs where instead of chulam in the present form, it's yeah. So there's tzameh, ra'ev, usually things that describe that are closer to adjectives. Okay, tzameh and ra'ev, for lack of a better ones, or shamein, right? Those all have normal looking future tenses and past tense, but in the present tense, the chulam becomes a kamatz, right? And also the feminine doesn't look the same. Whereas you have, let's say he's ochel, so it's ochelet. If he's tzamei, she's tzmeya. Instead of a tough at the end, you have a silent hey. It becomes a kamatz silent hey instead of a seglet verb. Ochel and ochelet. Which is the more biblical form, yoter or yather? Yoter or yather? The biblical, the one with the chulam. That's the one that's actually the Torah, yoteret. That's just the feminine form of yoter. Okay, so the one with the kamatz is later rabbinic form. So when they wrote the Rambam here and they vowelized it, they used the rabbinic form. It's like the word leda, lada'at or leda. So what's the difference? Well, lada'at is biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew, and leda with a ayin is mishnaic, rabbinic style. So with a kamatz like we have in our printed versions, it's rabbinic style, and here in Machon Mamre, it's more biblical style.
In the form of do they write Lugin or Lugin?
Machon Mamre they have with the nun. Okay, with the nun. So in the Torah would be lugim, obviously with the mem. There's very few of those actual nuns as a prefix, as a suffix for plural. Okay, so the first day of Sukkot in the temple, which happened to be on Shabbos, had a lot of korbanos. It's the most busiest day in the temple. And by the way, it's not every year that the first day of Sukkot is a Shabbos. The Nesachim required come out to 140 log of both wine and oil. So that's what we're going to see in Hilchot Minus. What's the breakdown? Well, there's 13 bulls offered that day. Each bull comes with 6 log. 6 times 13 is what? 78, right? There's 2 rams to be brought with the Musaf. Each ram has 4 log. 2 times 4 is 8. What?
It's 86, huh?
Next. Good. Keep track. There's 14 and 4 lambs brought. 14 lambs because that's the Musaf. And 4 lambs brought. Why? 2 for the Tamid, 2 for Shabbos. Total of 18 lambs, and each lamb has 3 log. So 3 times 18 is 54. And you add that up. And there's a he-goat as a sin offering, but the he-goat as a sin offering doesn't come with...
Is it 54?
Yeah, 54, 8, and 78. Yeah, so that's what it is. There's 140. And remember, for each of those bulls, rams, and lambs, the amount of oil and wine is the same. So it comes out to 140 log of wine and 140 log of oil offered, along with the minachos that day. And the he-goat for a sin offering doesn't have a mincha.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, that's the total. So that's the busiest day of wine and oil in the temple. So that's what a person who's not sure of what he promised to give to the temple. So that's what he's going to be bringing if he doesn't know what he brought. Doesn't know what he said he would do. Let's open up the next parak. This is the fun part, at least for me, for whatever reason. So I had mentioned before that I didn't exactly. Well, it's not that I disagree with Rav Sharkin that thing about the letter he wrote. I don't see what the point was. But I also heard a shir this week because I want to hear what he has to say, and I disagree with his assessment of the state of the bama in Givon. He was talking about the heter bamos and all that, which I was talking about with his people a few years ago, and I think that they made a mistake, which is not like the Rambam, that they called the Tanakh says there was a bama in Givon. That's the bama gedolah. So it's just like any other bama, private altar. No, bama is a word that sometimes meant altar, and eventually in the Hebrew of Tanakh and the Nevi'im, it meant private altars that eventually were prohibited. But when it says that the bama in Givon was a bama, that just means that people were calling it like the Great Mizbeach, even though it was certainly not a bama. It was the central Mizbeach of the Mishkan. It wasn't just anybody else's Mizbeach.
Okay.
Very important. So I guess I disagree with him on that one. Okay. Why is this important? Because we get to the idea of heter bamoth again. We're going to discuss this here. The Rambam mentioned right at the beginning of this book that there was central sanctuaries, and he didn't mention he didn't go into the details of the bamoth as they were. Bamoth means, for our purposes, private altars, a place where a person or people did sacrifice to God, and it wasn't the central, what the Rambam calls the mikdash. Mikdash has a certain definition. There has to be a chatzer around it, and there has to be a kodesh and a kodesh kodashim and a kior and another altar for the incense. Basically the minimal that you have to have for a base of mikdash. And there were certain times in history where, because the mikdash was not considered the resting place, so to speak, even though it was identical to what it was in previous times, right? That people could actually offer sacrifice beyond the temple. So what happened? It says in the Mishneh and the Tosefta that before they built the Mishkan, Jews could offer sacrifice wherever they wanted. Then they built the Mishkan, and suddenly became prohibited to sacrifice anywhere but on the central altar of the Mishkan. And when they crossed the Jordan River for some reason, it was the same Mishkan that they had in Arvos Moav and elsewhere. Same Mishkan, same Kohanim, and it's set up the exact same way. But now you can build your own altar wherever you want and also offer sacrifice to God. That's Heter Bamos. How was that Mishkan any different? There was nothing physically different than the Mishkan as it was. And by the way, after the destruction of Shilo, that Mishkan was set up in Novin Givon, exactly as it was in the Gilgal and as it was in the desert. The ark wasn't there; it was in storage. But the Mishkan, as the Rambam described it, as what makes it a mikdash, was exactly as it was. There were Kohanim working there, and there was a mechitza that defined the Azara, and there was one altar for sacrifice, another altar for incense, and the kior was there. That's where the Kohanim did their job as described in the Torah. So that was a mikdash, and that's where they used to do all the mitzvahs that are required of a Beis HaMikdash. But at certain periods in time, Jews could also build their own altars and sacrifice there. Make sense?
Okay.
But generally speaking, for most of history, let's say there was according to the way they reckon it in the Gemara there, the first 14 years in the land of Israel and 57 years between the destruction of Shiloh and the building of the temple in Jerusalem, you had something called the Heter Bamos. 71 years of Jewish history, where why? So that's a Rambam that you could see, you could read it. Or you could go back into the archives. We analyze it, so you know it's a good thing. I was trying to point this out. That was my argument with a lot of these Merkaz trained rabbis. They had ideas that are mentioned by Achronim, but the problem is they try to attribute them, they try to work them into the Rambam's halachas here, but they don't fit with what the Rambam writes explicitly elsewhere. So that's why I went to war against them about this.
What are the Merkaz rabbis?
They said that the Heter Bamos was because the ark was not in its place, which is a Havamina mentioned in the Rishalmi, but then rejected. What made Heter Bamos, like the Rambam says, is strictly the historical context. The Navi came and said, God is not in his resting place, so you could offer sacrifice wherever you want. So when the Jews crossed into the land of Israel, suddenly the Machonos don't exist. There's a state of war that's unsettled. So now, Heter Bamos. But when God had the Shilo sanctuary established, now it's the Menucha, or the Nachla. Right now it's the Menucha. So now no Heter Bamos. And when Shiloh was destroyed, they continued with temple service, and they could have put the ark back in the Mishkan where they set it up next. They chose not to, for whatever reason. They put it in storage and then they brought it to Jerusalem, but they never united it with the Ohel Moed. So once again, there was a Heter Bamos. You could offer sacrifice wherever you wanted by building an altar. But the Gemara says it's based on a drasha. The Navi revealed to them they were between the Menucha and the Nachla. Menucha was Shiloh, and Nachla was in Jerusalem. And the intervening period, there'd be a Heter Bamos. Kilo vasem ad ata. You haven't come to that point yet. And when they first got into the land of Israel, they also didn't even get to the Menucha. So there was a Heter Bamos. Okay? So that's basically the Rambam Shita, and he says it very clearly in the Parish of Mishnayos. And that's how you can understand the halachas. And it because people got carried away with this Havami and the Rishalmi, that the Heter Bamos was because of the absence of the ark, you get into all sorts of halachic problems. So why wasn't there Heter Bamos the entire Second Temple time? The ark wasn't in the Holy of Holies in the entire Second Temple, even part of the First Temple. And does that mean if they would take the ark out of the Shiloh, it would suddenly create a Heter Bamos? That's basically what the Rambam is trying to point out there. Okay, Mikdash always existed, and Heter Bamos was something, something else entirely, depending on how the Navi told them the halacha applies now. Which means, by the way, that what happened in Novin Givon, where the ark was absent, never was in Novin Givon, but the Mikdash was there according to the Rambam. That's a precedent for Second Temple times, where the ark was also missing, but it was still entirely based on Mikdash. What's the question?
What are they trying? What is their basis for wanting to say that it's connected to the?
Because the Rambam in Hilchos Beis Bechira talks about the ark being hidden.
Okay.
He talks about the place where the ark is supposed to be and how it was hidden. So the Sfas Emes, I think, so it was a Meshech Chochmah and Rabbi Soloveitchik have a whole thing that the ark is what makes the temple holy. So the the holiness is what makes all the mitzvahs and the prohibitions applicable.
But they say there's no kedusha taken like that.
Yeah, if the ark is absent, so it must be that the ark is still in the temple. But the problem is, yeah, the Rambam says the ark is somewhere underneath the woman's courtyard of the temple, which is many basically really far away from where it's supposed to be and underground. So how's that within? Like the Rambam says, the place of the ark is within the Holy of Holies on the Even Shasiyah. The fact that they buried the ark somewhere under the Temple Mount makes it that the temple still has kedusha because the ark is present. That's foreign from what the Rambam says. The Rambam never said such a thing. They're wondering why the Rambam seems to take sides in this historical argument. Where was the ark hidden, or what happened to the ark? Disappeared, and it's a machlokas tanoim.
Okay.
So the Rambam holds like those who say that the ark was hidden underneath the temple. And they said, why does the Rambam need to say this? And the answer is because, according to them, because the ark is what gives the whole temple complex its holiness. And that's against what the Rambam writes in the Parish of Mishnayos and how he interprets the Gemara. And it's also against the Gemara in Zvachim, by the way. So instead, like I showed them, what Rambam's pointing out there is, even though the ark isn't there, the Holy of Holies is still holy because the Even Shasiyah is there. That's the Machon that God chose. So yes, they happen to put the ark there for a while. But even if the ark is absent, the Machon has holiness. And that's what the Rambam says in two places. Beis HaMikdash is always holy because God's presence is always there, and he chose the place, and it'll never not be holy. And that's why you can still bring korbanos today, not because the ark is hidden under the temple now. Make sense? Yeah. So why do you mention that? Because he's trying to point out what happened to the ark, but he doesn't say that the ark is continued. And like I said, we have a lot more about this to say. So we'll read this halacha. I think maybe we should go to sleep though. We'll start walking home. Kol korbanot kulan, bein korbanot be'ma va'of, bein korbanot benachot. All the sacrifices, whether it's of animal or bird or the libations, mitzvah se lakrivan beveit habechira. It is a commandment, positive commandment to bring them in. Once again, beis habechira. Why does Rambam say beis habechira? That's what he chooses to call the temple right at the beginning of these halachas. That's what he calls it. It doesn't Hilchot Beit HaMikdash, Hilchot Beit HaBechira. Why does Rambam say Bechira? Because the Rambam says, no, Bechira means it's chosen by God. It means it's revealed to us by a prophet, not somewhere else. Bechira means this place as opposed to others. God doesn't choose like a man chooses. Let's say God chooses a king or God chooses a temple or a people. It doesn't mean God had a few choices, so I choose, just like I choose to eat a walnut or an almond out of this bowl, so I'm going to pick the walnut as opposed to the almond. That's not how God works. He hadn't intended Am Yisrael and the Beis HaMikdash since before creation. So it doesn't mean that he chose Jerusalem, for example, or chose David or Aaron or Israel. It means he revealed it through the prophet. Okay? And said, this one, not of someone else. You can't say, well, I don't like the Aaronite priests, I want someone else to have the priesthood, right? That's pretty bad. You can't say, well, I want eternal kingship to be in a different family, not the Davidians, or I want the people who observe the Torah and connect it to God, I want that to be the Christians and the Muslims. No, it's the Jews. Okay? That's what God said. That's what it means. Bechira means this place only. And God said so through the prophet. So it's a mitzvah to bring in that place. And by the way, it also means that in its day, Shilo was Beis Bechira. Okay. Oh, there was no mitzvah that they did in temple times that they didn't do at Shilo. And there's no Havamina that should be otherwise. It's not like they said, oh, we can't do Hakel because the Beis HaMikdash hasn't been built yet. So all those years, a few centuries, from the times of Yeshua until Shmuel Navi, they never did certain mitzvahs. They never did Hakel and Aliyah Regel. Adarabah, they say that was the problem. They were supposed to. So you need men like Elkanah to tell people, by the way, these are mitzvahs of Torah you're forgetting. We go on pilgrimage here. That's where they used to do all the mitzvahs. Like the Rambam says, it was a mikdash. There was no havamina that the Beis HaMikdash should be otherwise. So it says v'sham taseh kol asher anochi mitzawecha. And by the way, the Gemara and Chazal say all the halachas that are described in that section of Devarim, the place that God shall choose, applied to what? Shilo. It keeps saying the makom asher yivchar, makom asher yivchar, the place God shall choose. Why? Because he ended up choosing two places. Once he chose this, then he rejected it, and he chose something else, just like he chose a king and then rejected him. Okay. So too, it's a mitzvah, it's a positive commandment. So a person take care. Mitapel means take responsibility to bring the korbanot that he's taken upon himself, and bring them from abroad to the temple. Why I mention abroad? Because for most of Jewish history, when there was a temple, Jews lived in Chutz La'aretz, right? Jews lived in Bavel and in Egypt and in Greece and in what's nowadays Turkey, and even as far as Carthage in Spain and in Rome, right? And in Persia. Mordechai Tzaddik lived in Persia, right? So what would they have to do? If they obligated themselves to bring a korban, what did they have to do? Make sure to bring the korban to God's chosen place. Shnemar, rock. So this is a funny one. Hadashecha, right? You have it's a regular kamatz. It's not a kamatz katan. But even in the Machon Mamre version, it's written with a vav. Kodashecha. Okay? Rock kodashecha sheyulucha undarecha tisavata. Okay? No, your holy things that shall be for you, and the things that you promised to bring to God, okay, carry them, and you shall come. Tisa means take them up and bring them. Get yourself over to the temple. From the tradition, we learned that it's talking about kodshei chutz la'aretz, means sacrificial food created in chutz la'aretz, that he's supposed to make sure to bring them to the temple. There's one exception, by the way. They point out bechor behema Torah. That's not brought from chutz la'aretz. The Rambam writes elsewhere, she'ein mivito to michutz la'aretz, kemo she'ein miviim dagam v'tirosh michutz la'aretz v'mevi ye'ochel b'mumo. What do you do with the korban before behema Torah? It's supposed to be a korban, but if it develops a mum, then it can be eaten. Turns back to chulin, right? So if you bring a bechor behema Torah from chutz la'aretz Eretz Yisrael, you just have to wait for it to develop a mum and then to eat it. It can't be a korban. So too, we don't bring grain and wine offerings from chutz la'aretz. Grain and wine offerings to the temple have to come from Eretz Yisrael. Why is that significant now? Because we get our significant amount of our dagan v'tirosh from chutz la'aretz nowadays. A lot of the grain comes from chutz la'aretz.
That's why
It used to be like Russian countries, like Ukraine.
I've never seen that says Mechiata.
Yeah, because most of our grain and grain products come from chutz la'aretz, Eastern Europe, and a lot of the wine. We've said this before, like over here. This is a bottle of wine. Here in Israel, most of the grapes either we're eating them, and the fancy grapes used to make high quality wine, right? But your generic Israeli grape juice, which all tastes the same, by the way, is Yavul Nachri or Yavul Chutz La'aretz, and it's made by basically one or two consortiums here in Israel.
I thought that was
Yaakov Mahadran, I think it's called.
I thought it was very funny. They brought us a bunch of stuff for Jewish folks.
And a lot of
And
it was
they brought us the grape juice.
and it was
Turn the bottle around. It just cool. Like,
yeah. Most of
the
this thing I learned in America, we had high quality grape juice, Kedem grape juice, the finest of all the grape juices. Okay, yeah. So that's what I like to drink. And I come to Eretz Yisrael now, 24 years ago. And what happens? The Israeli grape juice, I don't like it. It tastes weak. I thought it was an Israeli grape juice problem. It turns out the Israeli grape juice that fills this Rami Levy bottle and this bottle and every other bottle, most of the bottles here in this country are grapes taken from Argentina, Spain, Turkey, and Italy, places like that, where they also have grapes. And they're brought to the factories here in Mishor Adumim and another place up north. And that's how they make this generic Israeli grape juice that fills all the bottles. Like I said, it's only like one or two companies make all the grape juice we drink here in this country. That's the Israeli brands. So yeah, that's a problem. But thank God, at least we're using our grapes for good wine. The stuff you get from Yaakov Shilo and Yaakov Sago, which are all local, by the way, and the ones in Yer Chevron and all those places, those are Jewish grown Israeli grapes, and they make a much finer product than the grape juice that fills these bottles. Okay, we'll stop it from here. We live to see destruction of Israel's enemies, the complete settlement of the land of Israel, the rebuilding of the temple speedily in our days. Shalom and Yitzchon. Have a good Shabbos. Be good.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.